Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and before you even fully open your eyes, you notice something is just completely different. Like your head is perfectly clear.
Right, no brain fog at all.
Exactly. No grogginess, no hitting snooze. You step out of bed and you actually feel, I don't know, leaner, more grounded.
Yeah, it's just ready to go.
And throughout the day, your mood is just inexplicably upbeat. Your energy levels are sky high, and you haven't even had a drop of caffeine.
Which is pretty rare for most of us, let's be honest.
Right. And here's the real kicker. While everyone around you at the office or, in your family is catching seasonal colds and sniffling, your immune system feels totally unshakable. You are just operating at an absolute peak level.
That sounds like the dream, really.
It does. And
Mhm.
now imagine that achieving this superhuman state didn't require you to spend a single dime.
No. Premium wellness subscriptions.
Nope. No exotic supplements shipped from halfway across the world. No fancy wearable gadgets. Just your own biology, finally working exactly the way it was designed to.
It sounds like the opening pitch for a very expensive biohacking retreat. But what we are looking at today is actually the exact opposite of a commercial gimmick.
Yeah, it's just raw science.
Exactly. It is raw biological truth. Because we spend so much time in this modern world obsessing over how to, buy health.
Oh, totally. We treat our bodies like these complex machines that constantly need expensive external fixes.
Right. But the most powerful interventions, the things that literally change the architecture of our cells, the density of our brain tissue, and the responsiveness of our immune system, they rely on these ancient, dormant triggers that you already possess.
Which is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at this incredibly dense, just fascinating transcript from the Ultimate Human podcast.
It's a really great source.
It really is. And the goal is to extract and analyze 5 scientifically backed, strictly zero-cost biohacks from it.
And these are the exact protocols being used by, elite athletes and peak performers to optimize human physiology.
Right, but they are entirely accessible to you, the listener, right this second. Your body is practically biologically starving for these inputs. You don't need a prescription. You don't need a gym membership.
You just need a fundamental understanding of how your own machinery works, basically.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to optimize the system, we really have to start at the absolute bedrock.
You can't hack a tired system.
Right. You cannot run a high-performance software update on a computer when the battery is dying and, the fan is clogged with dust.
That's a great way to put it.
So before we can introduce any new, intense biological stressors to your body, we have to fix the baseline. We have to talk about the biological necessity of sleep.
And we aren't just talking about logging hours in bed, right?
No, not at all. We're talking about engineering what the research refers to as the sleep fortress.
The sleep fortress. I love that term.
Yeah.
Because the foundation is just non-negotiable. If you try to implement advanced physiological hacks on a sleep-deprived body, your nervous system is already too compromised to adapt positively.
Yeah, it just backfires.
Right. Sleep is not a passive luxury. It is an aggressive, vital biological necessity. And the data points we have from the source on the consequences of ignoring this are, well, they're terrifying.
They really are. Let's look at those numbers. The golden rule, the absolute sweet spot for adult cognitive function, emotional regulation, and physical recovery, is 7 hours of high-quality sleep.
Not 6, not 5.5, 7.
7. And there is a staggering statistic in the data. If you are sleeping less than 6 hours a night, you are 4 times more likely to catch a cold compared to someone getting 7 or more hours.
That's a 400% increase in vulnerability to basic pathogens, which is wild.
It is. What is actually happening in the body to cause that?
What's fascinating here is the precise mechanism driving that vulnerability. When we chronically shortchange our sleep, we aren't just enduring daytime fatigue, we are actively suppressing our natural killer cells.
And those are like the frontline soldiers of our immune system,
Yeah.
all right?
Exactly. And simultaneously, we are ramping up cortisol, which is our primary stress hormone. Chronic sleep deprivation elevates your baseline stress so severely that in the literature, it is literally utilized as a form of physiological torture.
Oh, wow. So when you sleep, your body is engaged in, heavy reconstruction.
Yeah, it's like the night shift coming into a factory to clean up the biochemical mess from the day.
I was reading about the glymphatic system in the brain in this transcript, and it's incredible. From my understanding, throughout the day, just the simple act of thinking and, metabolizing energy creates waste products.
Right, like beta amyloid proteins.
Yeah, and they just build up in the brain tissue. And during deep sleep, the brain cells actually shrink in size
Hmm.
so that cerebrospinal fluid can wash through the brain and flush all that toxic sludge out. Am I getting that right?
You've nailed the exact mechanics.
Yeah.
The glial cells in the brain literally shrink by like up to 60% during deep, slow-wave sleep.
60%, that's huge.
It is. And this creates physical space, allowing the cerebrospinal fluid to just rush in and power wash those neurotoxins out of the central nervous system.
So if you cut your sleep short, that power washing cycle is interrupted.
Exactly. You are quite literally waking up with a dirty brain. And over time, the accumulation of that beta amyloid plaque is heavily correlated with cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases.
That is terrifying.
And at the same time, this washing is happening. The brain is taking the fragile short-term memories from the hippocampus and solidifying them into the cortex for long-term storage.
So less than 7 hours means you're operating with neurotoxins intact and failing to save your memories from the day.
Yeah, you're just leaving the factory a mess.
But getting that quality sleep requires confronting the environment we sleep in. There's a brilliant framing in the material regarding blue light. We all know staring at our phones at 11 p.m. is bad, but the research specifically classifies blue light from screens as an anti-sleep drug.
Yeah, it essentially pharmacologically blocks sleep.
And it makes me think about how deeply ingrained alarms are in our culture. Like, we all set alarms to wake up, to jolt ourselves into the day. But why don't we set alarms to go to sleep?
It's a complete inversion of how we view our time, isn't it? We treat waking up as this mandatory contractual obligation with the outside world, our jobs, our kids,
Right.
but we treat going to sleep as a highly negotiable, optional appointment with ourselves. And it's an appointment we constantly cancel to watch one more episode or scroll for another 20 minutes.
Oh, I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are. Setting an alarm to initiate your sleep routine is the most critical behavioral shift you can make. The physiological data, particularly the massive data sets collected by companies like Whoop, emphasizes that consistent bedtimes are paramount.
So it's not just the amount of sleep, it's the timing.
Right. When your bedtime fluctuates wildly, your circadian rhythm is in a constant state of jet lag. Consistency trains the brain to anticipate the hormonal drop required for sleep.
Okay, so the first step of the sleep fortress is the behavioral alarm. But the physical parameters of the room are incredibly specific in this transcript. Let's start with temperature.
This is a big one.
The data says the room must be kept strictly between 67 and 69 degrees Fahrenheit. That's actually quite cool. Why does the human body require that specific thermal window to shut down?
Well, to initiate sleep, and particularly to enter the deepest stages of restorative sleep, your core body temperature needs to drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a deeply conserved evolutionary trigger. As the sun went down, the ambient temperature dropped, signaling to our ancestors' biology that it was time to rest.
That makes total sense.
So when you keep your room at 67 to 69 degrees, you are creating a thermal environment that effortlessly pulls heat away from your core. If the room is, say, 74 degrees, your body has to work metabolically to dump that heat, which causes tossing, turning, and fragmented sleep architecture.
Okay, so we dialed down the thermostat to mimic a prehistoric night. Now, what about the light? The phrase used to describe the ideal bedroom is surgically dark.
Surgically dark, yes.
That means buying a roll of black electrical tape and covering up the tiny glowing red light on your smoke detector. It means throwing a heavy towel over the digital clock, pinning the hotel curtains together so not even a sliver of the street lamp bleeds in.
It sounds obsessive, I know, but the neurobiology demanded it. People severely underestimate how sensitive human photoreceptors are.
Really? Even just a tiny LED?
Yeah, it takes a remarkably small amount of light, literally a fraction of a single candle's wattage, to disrupt your sleep.
But wait, if my eyes are closed, how does a tiny red LED across the room actually affect my brain? Doesn't the eyelid block that out completely?
It actually doesn't. Our eyelids are surprisingly translucent.
Really?
Yeah, they did not evolve to block out high-intensity, concentrated artificial LEDs. They evolved to protect the eye while still allowing us to detect the gradual brightening of the rising sun.
Oh, that makes sense.
You have specific photoreceptors in your retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. They don't form images, they just measure light intensity.
So they're just light sensors.
Exactly. If there's ambient light in the room, those photons easily pass through the eyelid, hit those receptors, and send an electrical signal straight to the brain.
And what does that signal do?
That signal actively raises cortisol, our wakefulness hormone, and it suppresses melatonin. That tiny smoke detector light is essentially whispering to your brain all night long like, hey, stay alert. The sun might be coming up.
That is wild. Your brain is running a low-level threat analysis on a charging cable.
It really is. It prevents you from ever sinking into the deepest, most restorative stages of paralysis.
Wow. So we've taped up the LEDs. The room is a cool 68 degrees. Now we have to look at the behavioral wind down. The protocol suggests cutting off all screens 60 minutes prior to bed, or, at the absolute minimum, utilizing strict red light settings on your devices to strip away the blue spectrum.
Which is crucial, yeah.
But the metabolic rule is equally strict. Absolutely no food 2 hours before sleep.
Right. Digestion is a highly energy-intensive thermogenic process.
Thermogenic meaning it creates heat.
Exactly. If you eat a large meal and get into bed, your gastrointestinal tract requires massive blood flow and energy to break down that food. This naturally raises your core body temperature, which directly fights against that 67-degree cooling process we just established as mandatory for deep sleep.
Oh, so you're literally fighting your own thermostat.
Yes. Furthermore, instead of diverting cellular energy to that glymphatic brainwashing and tissue repair, your body is bogged down metabolizing like a bowl of cereal. You are completely short-circuiting your recovery.
Okay, so we've optimized the external variables. The room is dark, cool, and we aren't digesting. But what about the internal variables?
Of the racing mind.
Right. What if you get into this perfect fortress and your mind is still racing with anxiety about tomorrow's presentation? There's a specific, completely free mental visualization technique outlined in the source.
A great one.
It involves imagining all those chaotic, abstract thoughts spinning in your head, and then consciously pulling them down, physically breathing them into your lungs, holding them for a second, and exhaling them out of your body.
The brilliance of that visualization is how it bridges the psychological and the physiological.
Yeah.
Anxiety lives in this abstract space of the mind.
Yeah.
By visualizing the thoughts moving from the brain down into the lungs, you are attaching a physical mechanical action to an intangible stressor. You are engaging the diaphragm and quite literally pushing the physiological markers of stress out of your system.
And that biological transition perfectly sets up our next major tool. Because sleep is our passive overnight defense system. It cleans the house when we're offline.
Right.
But you can't go to sleep at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday when your boss drops a massive project on your desk.
No, you definitely can't.
We need an active, real-time manual override for our nervous system while we are awake and under fire. Which brings us to the second biohack, conscious breathwork.
We are moving from the environmental baseline to a powerful, instantaneous internal intervention. And the data here points to a massive mechanical error in how modern humans operate. The vast majority of us are breathing incorrectly for our entire waking lives.
The anatomy of a breath. This part of the research is fascinating because we do it 20,000 times a day, yet we're doing it wrong. Most of us are stuck in a shallow, chest-breathing pattern.
Right, up high.
Yeah, we're only inflating the apex, the very top third of our lungs. And by doing so, we are accidentally keeping our bodies locked in a sympathetic nervous system state, which is our fight-or-flight mode.
To understand why this is so detrimental, you have to look at the evolutionary mismatch. Short, rapid, shallow breaths from the upper chest are the exact mechanical respiratory pattern our ancient ancestors used when they were sprinting away from a predator.
So it's literally an emergency protocol.
It is an emergency protocol. It signals to the brain to dump adrenaline, spike the heart rate, and prepare for immediate physical violence or flight. Today, we are sitting perfectly still in ergonomic desk chairs, reading stressful emails, but we are utilizing the respiratory mechanics of someone running for their life. We are chronically, mechanically signaling physical danger to our own biology.
So we're effectively tricking our own brains into a state of panic just by how we move our ribs. How do we mechanically correct this?
True conscious breathwork requires activating the lower lobes of the lungs, the massive, highly vascularized air sacs at the bottom of the rib cage.
Down in the belly.
Exactly. To fill them, you cannot just lift your shoulders. You must engage the diaphragm, which is a dome-shaped muscle at the base of the chest, and the intercostal muscles between the ribs.
Okay, so belly breathing.
Right. When you pull air deep into the belly, causing the stomach to expand outward, You are doing far more than just increasing oxygen saturation. You are physically pulling the levers of your nervous system.
And this is exactly where the vagus nerve comes into play. I see the vagus nerve mentioned constantly in wellness spaces, but the visual description in this data is incredible.
It really paints a picture.
It describes the vagus nerve as a massive tree rooted in your brainstem, dropping its trunk down your neck and spreading thick, deep roots all throughout your heart, your lungs, and your digestive tract.
It is the biological superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest counterpart to fight or flight. What's fascinating here is how directly we can manipulate that specific nerve.
How do we do that?
Well, the vagus nerve runs right through the diaphragm. When you take a deep, diaphragmatic breath and physically expand that muscle, you apply mechanical pressure and stretch to the vagus nerve.
Oh, so you're actually physically touching it, basically.
Yes. This stretch stimulates the nerve to release a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which instantly acts like a heavy brake pedal on your heart rate.
So you are physically massaging the brake pedal of your nervous system.
Exactly. It sends a massive, undeniable signal back up the tree to the brain that says, hey, we have time to take a slow, deep breath. Therefore, we cannot possibly be running from a tiger. Turn off the adrenaline.
That's amazing.
It actively lowers resting blood pressure, drops circulating cortisol, and pulls you out of a panic state within seconds.
Okay, I have to push back here because this is the skepticism a lot of listeners will have. Breathing is automatic. The brainstem handles it without us ever thinking about it.
Sure.
If my body actually needed to calm down, wouldn't my autonomic nervous system just adjust my breathing for me? Why do I have to consciously take manual control over a system that's been on autopilot since the day I was born?
It's a great question. And the answer lies in that modern evolutionary mismatch we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Your automatic breathing is heavily influenced by your psychological state.
Okay.
If you perceive a threat, even if that threat is just a looming deadline or a financial worry, your brain initiates the physical stress response, which includes shallow breathing, to prepare you to fight or flee.
Right.
The problem is, because you were just sitting at a desk, you never burn off those stress hormones through physical exertion. The threat never resolves physically, so the brain stays stuck in a feedback loop.
A loop of what, exactly?
Yeah. It says, I feel stressed, so I breathe shallowly. I'm breathing shallowly, which confirms to my brain that I am in danger, so I stay stressed. Conscious breathwork is the manual override that breaks that feedback loop.
And is it really more effective than traditional meditation? We're always told to just close our eyes and be mindful if we're stressed.
The clinical data strongly suggests it is. The research highlights a landmark 2023 meta-analysis comparing breathwork directly to mindfulness meditation.
And what did they find?
The findings were definitive. Brief, daily conscious breathwork reduces anxiety, improves mood, and lowers physiological arousal significantly more effectively than meditation alone.
That is a massive paradigm shift, just mechanical breathing beats trying to quiet the mind.
Because it works from the bottom up rather than the top down, meditation asks a highly anxious, overstimulated brain to somehow quiet itself.
Which is so hard.
It is incredibly difficult. It's like trying to calm a storm by yelling at it.
Mm-hmm.
Breathwork doesn't ask the mind to do anything. It uses the heavy mechanical machinery of the physical body to force the chemistry of the brain to change.
It's biological leverage.
That's why these techniques are frequently referred to as natural Xanax. They alter your neurochemistry on demand.
Let's give the listener the exact operating manual for this natural Xanax. The transcript heavily recommends the 4-7-8 method for beginners. What are the specific mechanics of that?
The 4-7-8 protocol is brilliant in its simplicity. You inhale quietly through your nose for a slow count of 4. The focus here is pulling the air deep down, expanding the belly, completely relaxing the shoulders.
Okay, breathe in for 4.
You then hold that breath internally for a count of 7. Finally, you exhale completely through your mouth for a slow count of 8, making a whoosh sound.
And there's a specific way to exhale, right?
A crucial tip is to purse your lips almost like you're breathing out through a tiny straw to create back pressure and strictly control the release of the air.
And the extended length of the exhale is the real secret weapon here, right? You're exhaling for twice as long as you inhaled.
Precisely. This capitalizes on a physiological process called respiratory sinus arrhythmia.
Okay, big words. What does that mean?
When you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up slightly. When you exhale, your diaphragm moves up, pressure in your chest changes, and your vagus nerve fires, actively slowing your heart rate down.
Oh, wow.
By forcing the exhale to be twice as long as the inhale, you are drastically skewing your nervous system's balance toward that vagal, heart rate lowering parasympathetic state.
The protocol also provides a perfect contextual setup for this. It advises doing this tomorrow morning for just 5 minutes before you even touch your phone.
Which is very important.
And specifically, it says to do this while looking outside into nature, gazing as far out onto the horizon as you possibly can. What does staring at the horizon have to do with breathing?
It's layering biological signals of safety. When you stare at a screen or a book a few inches from your face, the ciliary muscles in your eyes have to contract tightly to focus.
Right.
That muscular contraction is a microstressor. When you look out at a distant horizon, you engage in panoramic vision. The ciliary muscles completely relax.
And the brain notices that.
It does. This relaxation sends a parallel signal to the brainstem that perfectly complements the vagus nerve stimulation from your breathwork. Your body collectively registers. My breathing is slow, my eyes are relaxed, the environment is vast and safe. You'll literally feel your jaw unclench and the tension melt out of your neck.
So we've taken manual control of the nervous system's brake pedal. But you can manually pump the brakes all day if your brain fundamentally thinks it's the wrong time of day because you've been living in a dim indoor cave. Your stress hormones are going to keep misfiring.
Exactly.
We have to shift from internal breath to the external environment. We have to align the biological clock. And that brings us to the third zero-cost intervention, morning sunlight exposure.
This is where we synchronize our internal machinery with the rotation of the planet. Humans are fundamentally circadian creatures. Every organ, every cell in your body operates on a 24-hour rhythmic clock.
But that internal clock isn't perfectly accurate, right?
No, it needs to be reset or wound every single day. The master timekeeper for this entire system resides in a tiny cluster of thousands of cells in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
And the data makes it incredibly clear. The only key that fits into the SCN to wind that clock correctly is natural morning sunlight. It specifies that the light must hit your eyes directly, and you absolutely must be outside.
You cannot just flip on the bright overhead lights in your kitchen.
Right, and you cannot wear sunglasses. Why is indoor lighting, even if it feels bright, biologically useless for this?
It comes down to a measurement of light intensity called lux. Our visual perception is highly adaptable. Your pupils dilate indoors, so a brightly lit office feels perfectly visible.
Sure.
But an intensely lit indoor office space might only generate about 500 lux of light energy. By contrast, stepping outside on a sunny morning exposes you to anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 lux.
It is a massive difference.
Even on a completely overcast, cloudy day, you are still getting upwards of 10,000 lux outdoors. Our retinas are specifically looking for that massive, undeniable threshold of photon density to trigger the SCN.
So stepping outside without sunglasses sends an electrical shock wave of lux straight to the master clock.
Exactly. When that intense light hits those specific retinal cells we mentioned earlier, the signal shoots directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The SCN immediately broadcasts a systemic message across your entire body. It is officially daytime.
And what happens when the body knows it's daytime?
The instantaneous result is a hard stop on melatonin production, stripping away that lingering morning grogginess, and a healthy, sustained spike in cortisol to give you alertness and drive for the day.
But the part of this clinical research that I find most elegant is the serotonin-melatonin pathway. It links the light we get at 8 a.m. directly to how deeply we sleep at 11 p.m.
It's a beautiful system.
If I understand this correctly, serotonin isn't just the happy chemical that makes us feel good. It's actually the raw biological ingredient for sleep. Am I right in thinking my morning sunlight is literally cooking the ingredients for my melatonin later?
That is exactly how the biochemistry works. When morning sunlight triggers the SCN, it stimulates the synthesis of serotonin from the amino acid tryptophan.
Okay.
Throughout the day, that serotonin provides you with feelings of well-being, calm focus, and emotional stability. But serotonin is a precursor molecule. About 12 to 14 hours later, as the sun sets and the environment grows dark, assuming you are protecting your sleep fortress from blue light, the pineal gland in your brain chemically converts that stockpiled serotonin directly into melatonin.
So if you hide indoors all morning, you never manufacture the serotonin stockpile, which means when night comes, your pineal gland reaches into an empty toolbox.
Precisely. It literally lacks the raw materials to build the sleep hormone. You cannot out-supplement a lack of morning sunlight. The research, heavily supported by data out of Stanford, demonstrates that robust morning light exposure dramatically decreases sleep latency, meaning how fast you fall asleep, and significantly increases the depth and duration of slow-wave sleep that very night.
That alone is worth stepping outside for. But here is where the data completely surprised me. The transcript points to studies, including data from WebMD, connecting morning sunlight directly to weight management.
This is fascinating.
Looking at the sun can lower your BMI. How on earth does light hitting the retina impact the adipose tissue on my waistline?
It sounds counterintuitive, but the metabolic pathways are deeply intertwined with the circadian rhythm. The study indicated that getting 20 to 30 minutes of morning light is strongly associated with a lower body mass index, independent of overall calorie intake.
Wait, independent of calories?
Yes, there are two primary mechanisms at play here. First, optimizing the circadian rhythm via the SCN perfectly regulates your metabolic hormones, specifically insulin and glucagon. When your clock is misaligned, your body experiences chronic, low-grade stress, leading to cortisol-induced fat storage, particularly visceral belly fat.
So just by aligning the clock, you stop the stress storage panic.
Exactly. But secondly, and perhaps more fascinatingly, there is emerging photobiology research suggesting that specific blue and ultraviolet wavelengths of morning sunlight can actually penetrate the skin and interact directly with subcutaneous white fat cells, potentially causing the lipid droplets within them to shrink and be released for energy.
So the light itself might be acting as a physical signal to the fat cells to release stored energy.
It really seems that way.
Furthermore, the behavioral cascade is huge. If you get that massive lux exposure, your daytime energy skyrockets. You naturally burn more calories throughout the day via non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you fidget more, you take the stairs, you feel like moving, because your biology thinks it's a bright, active summer day.
It shifts your entire metabolic baseline from sluggish conservation to active expenditure.
The actionable protocol for the listener is clear, and again, costs $0. Tomorrow morning, within 30 minutes of waking up, take your coffee and step outside. No sunglasses, no window glass. Windows filter out the necessary wavelength.
That's a very common mistake.
Right. The data says 5 to 10 minutes is the minimum effective dose to start the circadian cascade, but 20 to 30 minutes is optimal for the metabolic and weight management benefits. And importantly, as we noted, do this even if it is overcast.
Do not let clouds deter you. The lux intensity of a cloudy sky is still magnitudes higher than your indoor lighting. It is still effectively winding the master clock.
Right, so we have optimized our baseline. We've recovered with a dark, cool sleep. We've actively calmed our nervous system with diaphragmatic breathing. We've set our biological clock with a massive dose of photons.
The foundation is set.
Now, we transition into the realm of building superhuman resilience. And to achieve that, gentle alignment isn't enough. We have to purposefully introduce acute, shocking adversity to the system. We're moving to the fourth intervention, the raw, biological magic of cold exposure.
This is where we shift from coaxing the biology to aggressively challenging it. Cold exposure is undeniably the most visceral and psychologically demanding of all the protocols.
Oh, absolutely.
But it is built on a foundational biological principle known as hormetic stress, or hormesis.
Hormetic stress. Let's define that, because usually when we hear the word stress, we think of disease, burnout, and aging. How can a stressor be a biohack?
It is entirely about the dose and the duration. Chronic, unrelenting stress, like a toxic job, ongoing financial panic, or systemic sleep deprivation, is utterly destructive to cellular health. It degrades tissue and suppresses immunity.
Right, that's the bad stress.
Hormetic stress is the exact opposite. It is a short, severe, and highly controlled burst of adversity. When cells are subjected to this brief shock, they don't just recover to their previous baseline, they overcompensate.
What do you mean by overcompensate?
They build themselves back stronger, more efficient, and vastly more resilient to future stress.
Oh, it's the biological equivalent of lifting a heavy weight. You apply stress to tear the muscle fiber, and the body adapts by adding more muscle tissue. We're doing that, but to our neurochemistry and our immune system.
Exactly. And you don't need a $10,000 commercial cold plunge to achieve this. A standard cold shower is highly effective.
Or, as the data brilliantly suggests, you can fill large Tupperware containers with water, freeze them, and drop these massive ice blocks into a standard bathtub for a completely free, highly effective cold immersion setup.
Yes, DIY cold plunges work just as well.
Let's talk about the exact physiological response, because getting into 50-degree water is psychologically brutal. Why are we doing this to ourselves? The neurotransmitter data in the transcript is staggering.
The biochemical dump that occurs the moment your skin registers acute cold is one of the most profound natural shifts a human can experience. The transcript highlights a heavily cited clinical study where subjects were immersed in 14 degrees Celsius water, which is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit.
Not freezing, but intensely cold.
Right. And the blood test revealed that norepinephrine increased by 530% above the baseline.
Wait, a 530% spike. For context, what does a normal intervention do? If I drink a double espresso, I feel a kick. What is a 530% spike in norepinephrine actually doing mechanically in the body?
Well, norepinephrine is a primary catecholamine that acts as both a stress hormone and a neurotransmitter. Mechanically, it causes intense vasoconstriction, shunting blood away from the extremities to protect the core organs, and dilates your pupils.
And psychologically?
Psychologically, it is the molecule of hypervigilance, singular focus, and sharp attention. A cup of coffee blocks adenosine to prevent sleepiness, but it doesn't give you a 500% surge of raw vigilance.
Wow.
But the truly miraculous part of the data is the parallel spike in dopamine. The same study showed dopamine levels increasing by 250%.
A 250% dopamine spike. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation, drive, and goal-directed behavior. If you spike your dopamine by 250% at 7 a.m., that is a massive natural pharmacological high.
And crucially, unlike the dopamine spike you get from consuming sugar or scrolling social media, which spikes vertically and then crashes instantly, leaving you feeling depleted, the dopamine release from cold exposure is sustained.
So it doesn't just drop off.
Exactly. It elevates smoothly and remains elevated for hours after you warm up.
Yeah.
You are fundamentally rewriting your neurochemical baseline for the entire day, granting yourself hours of sustained drive and elevated mood.
Okay, so the brain is supercharged, but what about the body? The transcript highlights a massive randomized clinical trial out of the Netherlands. They had thousands of participants simply finish their regular warm morning showers with 30 to 90 seconds of cold water.
Such a simple intervention.
And the result was a 29% reduction in sickness absence from work, a third fewer sick days from 30 seconds of cold water. But a skeptic would ask, how does being cold actually kill a virus? Doesn't being cold make you sick?
That is a classic myth. Cold weather doesn't make you sick. Congregating indoors in poorly ventilated spaces during cold weather makes you sick. Cold water exposure doesn't kill viruses directly. What it does is train the immune infrastructure. When you get hit with cold water, the body perceives an immediate, life-threatening thermal shock.
It thinks you're dying.
Pretty much. It responds by triggering a mild, acute spike in pro-inflammatory markers, essentially running a massive fire drill for your immune system.
Yeah.
It releases a surge of leukocytes or white blood cells into the bloodstream.
It's deploying the troops because it thinks it's under attack.
Precisely. But because you turn the water off after 60 seconds, the threat vanishes. The long-term adaptation to running this daily fire drill is a dramatic increase in your baseline level of circulating immune cells, coupled with a massive reduction in systemic chronic inflammation.
So you're building a smarter immune system.
You are building an immune system that is highly responsive to real threats, but doesn't overreact to minor irritants.
There is another physiological adaptation mentioned here that is absolutely fascinating, the activation of brown fat. Most of us hear the word fat and we instantly want to destroy it. We think of it purely as dead weight. What is the biological difference between the fat around our waist and this brown fat?
The fat we typically want to lose is white adipose tissue. It is metabolically inactive. It is essentially just a cellular storage locker for excess calories.
Okay.
Brown adipose tissue, or brown fat, is a completely different biological tissue. It derives its brown color because it is absolutely packed with mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell.
Oh, interesting.
Brown fat does not store energy. Its primary function is thermogenesis. It physically burns circulating glucose and lipids to generate heat and warm the core blood supply.
That's an internal furnace.
Exactly. And it contains a specific protein called uncoupling protein 1, or UCP1, which allows mitochondria to bypass normal energy production and just create pure heat.
And the cold triggers this.
Yes. When you expose yourself to cold, your nervous system aggressively activates this brown fat. With consistent cold exposure, you actually increase the sheer volume and metabolic density of your brown fat stores.
So what does that mean for everyday life?
This means you are chronically burning more calories and dramatically improving your insulin sensitivity simply by building a stronger internal furnace.
The physiological benefits are undeniable, but we have to address the psychological friction here. Because standing in a warm, comfortable shower and forcing your hand to turn that dial to ice cold, your brain screams at you not to do it. It triggers every self-preservation instinct you have.
That psychological friction isn't a side effect, it is the primary benefit. You are actively training your prefrontal cortex to override the panic signals from your amygdala.
You're practicing doing hard things.
You are proving to yourself daily that you can execute a difficult action despite intense physical discomfort. That mental resilience translates directly to how you handle stress in your career and your relationships.
So how does the listener actually apply this tomorrow without just torturing themselves and quitting after one day? The data gives a perfect integrated protocol. Take your normal, luxurious, warm shower, wash your hair, do your routine. But for the last 30 seconds, turn the dial to cold.
Just 30 seconds to start.
And this is where we stack the biohacks. When that cold water hits, your biological reflex will be to gasp and revert to that panic, shallow chest breathing we talked about earlier.
And that is exactly when you deploy the conscious breath work. When the cold hits, you must intentionally force your diaphragm to expand. You must force a slow, pursed lip exhale.
Combining them.
By controlling the breath in the face of acute thermal shock, you are manually overriding the sympathetic panic response. You are looking at a massive physiological stressor and chemically signaling to your brain, I am perfectly in control.
And over a few weeks, that 30 seconds of controlled panic turns into 90 seconds of total calm. Okay, we have optimized the external inputs. We've mastered the light hitting our retinas, the temperature on our skin, and the oxygen in our lower lungs. Now, for the fifth and final protocol, we have to look entirely inward. We have to optimize the internal fuel and the timing of our cellular engines. We are talking about the ultimate cellular cleanse, intermittent fasting.
We've covered the neurology, the respiration, and the immune system. Now we must address the massive metabolic machinery of the gastrointestinal tract.
Right.
The data highlights intermittent fasting, or time-restricted eating, as the most searched and widely utilized biohack globally. But it's vital to frame this accurately, divorcing it from the toxic elements of traditional diet culture.
Right, the material is very careful to clarify that fasting isn't universally prescribed. Pregnant women, children, or those with specific medical conditions need to consult a physician.
Right.
But for the vast majority of adults, it is a profound metabolic reset. And the critical distinction is this. Fasting is not synonymous with starving. It is not necessarily about aggressively restricting calories. It is about condensing the timing of your eating to give your digestive system a desperately needed maintenance break.
Consider the modern environment. The average person consumes calories from the moment they pour cream in their coffee at 7 a.m. until they eat a handful of chips watching TV at 10:30 p.m.
Guilty as charged.
Right. Their digestive system, their liver, and their pancreas are running a continuous 16-hour marathon every single day. They never clock out.
That sounds exhausting for the body.
It is.
Yeah.
By simply extending the natural overnight fast by a few hours, you force the body to undergo a fundamental metabolic switch. You transition from burning circulating glucose or sugar to mobilizing and burning stored lipids, fat.
The material refers to fat as rocket fuel for the body. Why is burning fat biologically superior to burning sugar for our daily energy?
Burning glucose is like trying to heat a house by constantly throwing dried twigs and paper into a fireplace. It flares up, gives you a rapid spike of heat, and then burns out almost immediately.
Leading to the crash.
Which leads to the inevitable blood sugar crash, exactly. And that triggers intense cravings for more twigs, more carbohydrates. Burning fat, which happens when you deplete your liver's glycogen stores during a fast, is like placing a massive, dense oak log on the fire.
Oh, I see.
It burns slowly, steadily, and cleanly for hours. It provides a flat, unfluctuating supply of ketones and fatty acids to the brain and muscles.
So no more 3 p.m. desk slumps. But what does this mean for long-term physiological health? Because losing 7 to 11 pounds in 10 weeks, as the systematic review highlights, is great. But the real deep dive here is into the cellular level.
This is the best part.
There is a concept in the data called autophagy, backed by Nobel Prize-winning research. From what I gather, it's essentially the cells realizing they aren't getting external food, so they start eating their own garbage to survive. Am I reading that mechanism right?
You have hit the exact biological mechanism. The word autophagy literally translates from Greek as self-eating. When you deprive your body of external calories for an extended period, usually initiating deeply around the 14 to 16-hour mark, an energy-sensing enzyme called AMPK detects the nutrient scarcity.
It sounds the alarm.
It sounds the alarm. The cells realize no new building materials are coming in, so they activate specialized organelles called lysosomes.
And what do?
These lysosomes act like cellular Roombas. They hunt down old, damaged, misfolded proteins, oxidized lipids, and dysfunctional mitochondria. They consume this toxic cellular debris, break it down into basic amino acids, and recycle it to build brand new, optimized cellular structures.
That is staggering. Your body literally contains a built-in, automated anti-aging recycling plant, and it only turns on if you stop feeding it long enough.
Exactly. If you are constantly eating, insulin is high, and the mTOR pathway, which is the pathway of growth and proliferation, is constantly activated. Autophagy is completely suppressed. You're just building new cells on top of old damaged garbage.
So fasting is like hitting the cleanup button.
By fasting, you clear out the dysfunctional machinery that directly contributes to systemic aging and chronic disease.
And the clinical data proves this out beautifully. The transcript references massive data from Harvard Medical School and the journal Cell Metabolism, showing that this time-restricted feeding improves blood pressure, lowers cholesterol, and drastically reduces oxidative stress.
It's a full body upgrade.
But the study that completely blew my mind looked at pre-diabetic men. They utilized early time-restricted feeding, and they saw massive improvements in insulin sensitivity and blood pressure, even without any weight loss.
That is perhaps the most important data point in the entire fasting literature. It proves definitively that the biological upgrade isn't merely a secondary byproduct of losing weight on the scale.
It's the fasting itself doing the work.
The mechanical act of fasting, the period of low insulin and digestive rest, is directly healing the metabolic machinery independently of your body mass.
And those benefits don't stop at the neck, they heavily impact the brain. The research states that intermittent fasting dramatically boosts a protein called BDNF. What exactly is BDNF doing in the brain tissue?
BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. In neuroscience, it is frequently described as miracle grow for the brain.
Grow, I like that.
It is a vital protein that promotes the survival of existing nerve cells. And critically, it drives neurogenesis, the growth and maturation of brand new neurons and synapses, particularly in the hippocampus, the brain's memory center.
So by fasting, you are actively increasing your brain's physical capacity to learn, adapt, and store memories. You are quite literally growing a better brain.
From an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense. If an ancient hunter-gatherer hadn't eaten in 2 days, their brain couldn't afford to become lethargic and slow.
Right, they'd starve.
The biological stress of fasting triggered BDNF to make their brains sharper, more focused, and highly plastic so they could outsmart their environment and secure food. Fasting engages that ancient survival software.
So practically, how does a listener start doing this without giving up and binging on donuts by noon? The data heavily promotes the 16.8 method.
The 16.8 protocol is the gold standard for sustainability.
Oh.
You fast for 16 hours, which vitally includes the 7 or 8 hours you are sleeping, and you consume all of your daily caloric needs within an 8-hour window.
So what does that look like on a clock?
A very common and socially adaptable structure is eating your first meal at 12 p.m. and finishing your last meal by 8 p.m. Outside of that window, you consume 0 calories. Water, black coffee, and plain unsweetened tea are perfectly fine and actually help mobilize fatty acids. But absolutely no cream, no sugar, no bone broth.
But the protocol is highly realistic about the psychological friction here too. Jumping straight into a 16-hour fast tomorrow is going to cause a massive spike in a hormone called ghrelin, right? That's the hunger hormone that makes your stomach growl at 9 p.m.
Yes. Ghrelin is a highly trainable pulsatile hormone. It pulses at the exact times your body is habitually used to receiving food.
Oh, so it's tied to habits.
If you normally eat a snack at 9:30 p.m., your brain will release a massive surge of ghrelin at 9:30 p.m. tomorrow if you try to fast. It will feel like an intense wave of hunger.
So how do you beat it?
The secret to ghrelin is that it is a wave. If you just ride it out, drink a glass of water, and ignore it for 20 minutes, the hormone dissipates and the hunger vanishes. It does not just build infinitely until you starve.
That is such a crucial psychological anchor. The hunger isn't a permanent state, it's just a chemical wave passing through. The protocol suggests an on-ramp for beginners. Just start with a 12-hour fast.
Which is very doable.
Finish dinner by 7:30 p.m., completely eliminate the late-night snacking, and don't eat anything until 7:30 a.m. Once your body adapts to that, push breakfast to 9 a.m., then 10 a.m.
It's a gentle, progressive overload for your metabolism. You might experience some irritability or brain fog for the first few days as your body throws a tantrum, demanding the easy sugar it's used to.
The carb withdrawal.
But within a week, the metabolic switch flips. Your liver efficiently starts producing ketones from your fat stores. The hunger pangs disappear, the 3 p.m. crash is entirely eliminated, and you achieve that clean, unwavering, hyper-focused energy state.
It is the ultimate testament to the profound adaptability of human biology. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of scientific ground today. Let's synthesize this matrix. We have unpacked 5 completely free, evolutionarily backed tools to fundamentally optimize how your body operates.
5 powerful tools, yeah.
We established the sleep fortress, dialing in 67 degrees and absolute darkness to ensure our lymphatic system literally power washes toxins from our brain tissue. We learned to take manual control of the vagus nerve and pump the brakes on our sympathetic nervous system through deep, mechanical 4-7-8 diaphragmatic breathwork.
Such a game changer.
We utilize thousands of lux of morning sunlight to trigger the suprachiasmatic nucleus, halting melatonin, spiking cortisol, and perfectly aligning our 24-hour biological clock. We forced our vascular system to adapt and built a massive responsive immune infrastructure through the hormetic shock of 30 seconds of cold water exposure.
Building that resilience.
And finally, we triggered the cellular Roombas of autophagy and boosted brain-growing BDNF by condensing our eating window and giving our digestive system a 16-hour rest.
That's the full systemic reset.
The overarching narrative woven through all of this clinical data is undeniable. The ultimate human is already inside you. You don't need to buy it. You just have to unlock it by speaking the right biological language to your cells.
It is a profound blueprint for total physiological autonomy. But as the research clearly implies, theoretical knowledge means absolutely nothing without physical execution.
Yeah. Exactly. Information without application is just entertainment. So here is the specific challenge for you, the listener. Do not try to change your entire life all at once tomorrow. That is a recipe for overwhelming your system and quitting by Thursday.
Start small.
Pick just one of these tools. Decide right now. Will you end your shower on cold for just 30 seconds? Will you step out onto the porch for 10 minutes of raw sunlight while the coffee brews? Will you push your breakfast back by 1 hour? Just pick one. Execute it tomorrow morning and actually feel the undeniable shift in your own biology.
And as you implement that one tool, consider this final overarching thought. If we step back and look at the macro picture of these 5 protocols, sleeping in total darkness and cool temperatures, breathing deeply and mechanically, waking in direct alignment with the rising sun, enduring acute temperature fluctuations, and surviving extended periods without caloric intake, what we are fundamentally describing is simply the default daily reality of our ancient ancestors.
That's so true.
They lived in perfect alignment with these biological triggers by absolute necessity.
Wow. We are just meticulously recreating the prehistoric environment.
Exactly. It forces a radical reframing of how we view health. What if modern comfort, our perfectly climate-controlled offices, our constant exposure to artificial LED lighting, our sedentary posture, and our limitless 24/7 access to hyper-palatable food is actually the single greatest threat to our physiological integrity?
It really makes you think.
What if true peak wellness isn't about discovering the next advanced pharmaceutical or technology, but simply remembering how to be a little bit wild?
That is a phenomenal paradigm shift to leave on. We spend so much time, energy, and money trying to artificially engineer our way out of the exact environment our bodies were exquisitely designed to thrive in. We started this deep dive talking about how muddy, commercialized, and complicated the wellness industry can seem.
It could be overwhelming.
But the absolute truth, backed by the hardest clinical data, is that the most powerful medicine on earth doesn't cost a dime. Optimizing your life doesn't require a premium subscription. It just requires a courageous commitment to your own ancient biology. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now go outside, catch some photons, take a deep diaphragmatic breath, and we'll see you next time.